How's it going, and welcome back to another bonus episode of Mood for Feud. I'm your host Katya, and today is definitely going to be one of the darker episodes, some of the darker topics that we cover on this show, so please make sure you check the content warnings in the show notes and look after yourselves and skip this episode if it's not going to be a good listening experience for you. But we are going to be discussing the details surrounding Liam Payne's death, and then a little bit about how the internet's been reacting, things that I've noticed that I'm feeling, and yeah, we'll talk a little bit about all the feelings that come along when a celebrity unexpectedly passes away. Remember, if you enjoy the show and would like to support it, then please do leave a rating. You can leave a comment on Spotify, a written review on Apple Podcasts, and you can follow the show so you never miss an episode. I'm also on socials at Mood for Feud, and I'm always looking to chat pop culture, so send me a message there. Now, this topic is obviously one that I didn't have scheduled in my upcoming episodes, but a few of you did reach out saying you would be interested in an episode about this, and I thought maybe, it could be a nice opportunity to let out all these thoughts and feelings that I've been having since the news dropped that Liam Payne passed away. It's definitely going to be more of a candid or off the cuff episode. I'll be completely honest, I get a little bit awkward when it comes to talking about death. I particularly with this episode, because it's so recent, like it literally happened 2 weeks ago, I was really trying to think, like, how do I approach this topic, right? Like, do I just cover the facts of everything that happened and nothing else? And then that just seemed like a really cold and distant approach. And then I was like, do I just not really talk about what actually happened and just focus more on like my own feelings and reactions? But then that kind of just felt really self-absorbed. So in the end, I've landed somewhere in the middle where we'll go into the background. We'll cover the events leading up to Liam Payne's death, and then we'll talk a little bit about the way that the internet's reactions to everything, and just some like observations that I've made in the last 2 weeks. Observations of things I'm seeing online, but also observations of my own feelings, and then we'll wrap it up. But yeah, like I said, I feel awkward talking about death. I struggle to balance between saying my like honest opinions and then saying what I think people want me to say when it comes to topics like death, and other people's reactions around death seem very performative to me, and like my own reactions included, and so I just get a bit in my head about it. So I'm really sorry if you feel like this is inappropriate, or you feel like I'm not coming across in the right way. Like, I'm just being so upfront when I say like this is an awkward topic to me, but I think it's an important one, so I think we should still talk about it. I think it would be worse if I pretended like pop culture was some kind of fantasy fairy tale land where nothing wrong ever happened or nothing dark ever happened, and that's why I think it's important that we do lean into these darker topics as well. We can have fun speculating around love triangles and talking about crumble cookies, but we do also need to address some of these darker topics also. But obviously, that being said, if you're not in the right headspace to listen to this, or this isn't serving you, like, please feel free to skip, because it is grim. It's a grim topic, and there's no way to like brighten it or try and make it lighter. Okay, but let's get into what actually happened. So on the 16th of October, Liam Payne, obviously former One Direction boy band member, One Direction obviously being a hugely successful boy band. They were formed in 2010, 2011 on the X Factor TV show, and they were huge. They got to the levels of fame that people were likening to the Beatles in their time. So they were hugely successful, very popular. Yeah, unfortunately, on the 16th of October, one of the band members, Liam, he fell from his hotel balcony in Buenos Aires. So Liam had been visiting Argentina with his girlfriend Kate Cassidy. They were kind of holidaying, having a nice trip, and at the same time they were also there to go to Niall Horan's concert. Niall is another One Direction boy band member, and Niall was touring in Argentina at the time, and so Liam and his girlfriend Kate, they attended Niall's concert, but Liam also expressed that he was very excited to catch up with Niall and talk a lot, because since One Direction disbanded, the band members haven't been hanging out an awful lot. You know, a lot of them are pursuing solo music careers at the moment, so it makes sense. You know, they've all got their own tours and things to balance. So Liam was really excited to have this time to reconnect, I guess, with Niall and catch up. So that's basically the reason for why him and Kate were there. Now, Kate actually left the trip. She left Argentina and went back to the US a few days before Liam passed away, and I haven't been able to find why. Like, she obviously is grieving and isn't like doing a sit-down interview at the moment. There's a lot of speculation surrounding this. Like, was it always planned for her to be going back to the US before Liam? You know, did she have like another commitment, or did Liam extend the trip? And then there's also speculation as to whether they maybe had a fight and that's why she left before him, but I haven't seen anything like concrete actually explaining why she left. So she was no longer there when it happened. But basically on the 16th of October, the staff at the hotel where Liam was staying, they had called emergency services around 5 p.m. local time, and they were reporting that one of their guests in the hotel was very drunk, severely intoxicated, and potentially also on some substances or some drugs. They were concerned for the guest's safety because they were saying, you know, we can't access him. He's in his room. He's thrashing it. He's throwing things around, and there is a balcony there, and we're just really concerned. So can you please like send someone ASAP? And I listened back to the phone recording, which has been released, and yeah, you can tell like the staff member is like quite urgently trying to get emergency services dispatched, just because they could tell like this is not a safe situation and they wanted emergency services to be there. Now, Liam has opened up in the past about his struggles with drug addiction and also his struggles with mental health, and this is sadly unsurprising to me because, like I said, he was in the biggest boy band of my generation, and you know, he was 16, 17 when One Direction was formed, so he was a child really, and I can't even imagine how all of that fame, but also all of that pressure to perform and to do well and just constantly being on for the cameras, I can just imagine that would have had such an impact on anyone's mental health. And unfortunately with that, you know, hand in hand comes substance abuse, not all the time, but a lot of the time, substance abuse, drug abuse. And so it is really sad that it's not shocking when he opened up about it. You know, he would say that sometimes on tours he would spend a lot of time just by himself in his hotel room with the door locked and just like knocking back the minibar. I think that's another thing, like with a lot of fame comes a lot of access to drugs and alcohol, and because, you know, like money is unlimited and there are people literally working for you who, if you say to them like, I need you to get me this right now, are going to do it. So, and I think also with being in a band at such a young age that was so successful, it just made all the boys, all the band members very susceptible to exploitation, but also to like an extent a lot of sexualization. At the time it didn't strike me as odd because I was 14 or 13 when One Direction was formed and they, you know, shot up to worldwide fame. But looking back now, almost every single interview that they did, they would get asked about who they were seeing, whether they were dating anyone, are you single, are you taken, and that was always like a big fixation for everyone. And I don't know, I think I can just not understand, but it makes sense to me that all of that would have just been completely overwhelming and difficult to deal with. So yeah, I think it's really sad, but unfortunately it's a tale as old as time. Why is it like that is the is the big question I'm asking. Like, why are there not better laws to protect young people, but actually just all people in the entertainment industry? Because life doesn't give you a handbook of how to deal with this level of fame and wealth even. And I don't know, I just think we've seen this happen so many times. How is there still not better protection for people in the entertainment industry? I mean, it's something that I bring up a lot, but it just baffles me completely that we just watch this cycle happen again and again and again, and we don't do anything about it. So the staff member makes the call, asks them to please dispatch people because they're concerned for the guest's safety. However, by the time emergency services arrive, Liam has fallen from the balcony and is pronounced dead on the scene. And the autopsy revealed that he had multiple traumas, over 25 injuries, consistent with falling from a great height. And the autopsy also predicts that Liam may have been fully or partially unconscious when he fell. Reports start coming out that there were drugs in his system, including cocaine, but a full toxicology report hasn't been completed yet, so none of that is as concrete as people are reporting it is until the official toxicology report comes back. And the hotel room was completely destroyed. There was alcohol, there was a bunch of unidentified substances and broken furniture, and the investigation is still ongoing, so I imagine we'll be getting more details as that unfolds. But there are speculations on the internet, was this suicide? Did someone push him? Like, was there an altercation? What happened? And as you can imagine, when something unexpected like this happens, or a tragedy happens, the thing everyone tries to do first of all is like find some kind of reason or explanation for why this happened, to try to make sense of it all, right? And unfortunately, this has resulted in Liam Payne's ex, Maya Henry, receiving a ton of really disgusting hate from the internet. And that is because several weeks ago, Maya did come forward with allegations against Liam. She said she felt quite threatened by him and that he was obsessively trying to contact her, even though he was an ex at that point. And she just started speaking out around some of the things from their relationship and following their relationship. And other women have also come forward since Maya started being vocal around the allegations, basically corroborating Maya's stories. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what's going to happen. It was all very ongoing, so I haven't looked into it too much, but there is a strong likelihood that what Maya is saying is true. I hope that they do launch an investigation if they still can, and because it's a horrible thing to be abused by someone, obviously. But unfortunately, because all of this was happening in the lead up to Liam's death, hand in hand with the suicide speculation, people have started blaming Maya for Liam's death, saying it was her coming forward with all the allegations that caused him to spiral and get out of control, which is such an ugly thing to say to someone, because this is also why victims of abuse never want to come forward, because it's always such a shit experience. You're constantly having to justify yourself to people who think they know your abuser but actually don't, because 90% of the people who are defending Liam or calling her a liar don't actually know him, and she does. So why would your own word mean more than hers? Do you know what I mean? But we also start getting reports that Liam's music label had dropped him, and then also just people noticing that none of the other One Direction band members followed Liam on socials, even though he followed all of them. And there's just been a lot of finger pointing and a lot of people trying to find someone who can take the blame. And I get that that's human condition, we want someone to blame when these situations happen because we need somewhere to channel all of that grief and sadness and anger. But it's just not right, is it? It's just not okay to, particularly to direct this all at Maya. I mean, I've even seen comments, people saying are you happy now? You got what you wanted. And it's there's a big difference between wanting someone held accountable for the harm that they caused you and wanting someone dead. Like, that is wrong on so many levels of people to insinuate that. And I just truly feel so bad for her, and I hope she's got a really strong support network around her. And I also hope she's just like avoiding the internet at all costs, because it's disgusting out there. It's vile. Like, people are far too comfortable writing big things on topics that they actually don't know anything about. And this kind of brings me to one of the things that I've noticed, which is this idea that there is absolution in death, and that once someone passes away, you can no longer say that they were a bad person or that they did bad things without being a monster. Like, once that person dies, everything has to be absolved. And I just don't think that's true at all. Well, actually, I know that that's not true. And, you know, Liam can be a person who made mistakes, who potentially abused people and did terrible things, and we can also still feel sad or be upset with the fact that he passed away, or that he had mental health struggles and addiction struggles. And I don't think it needs to be one or the other. Like, I don't think you can only mourn someone who was picture perfect, but I think it is harmful to suddenly put this person on a pedestal and completely ignore or try to erase any evidence of them potentially not being as picture perfect as you maybe thought they might have been, just because they've died. It's almost like disingenuous, but it's also harmful, as we're seeing with the way the internet is reacting to Maya Henry at the moment. I think you can also hold someone accountable whilst recognizing that they needed help or that they weren't in a good place. This is actually an ethical dilemma that I see quite often in the true crime space, because a lot of true crime podcasters, YouTubers that I watch, they'll give like a rundown on the murderer's background and all the hardships that a lot of them endured, right? Because like trauma and violence is cyclical, and so they will talk about how, you know, these horrible, vicious, vile people were often abused in their own upbringing, often abused in their own homes, potentially bullied. You know, a lot of them had like really neglectful childhoods. And sometimes in the comments, I'll see people being like, why are you covering that? Like, it's almost like you're trying to make excuses for the people that they then murdered down the track. And it's like, no, because it's like, it's giving context, you know? And I think it's like awkward to think of these murderers as people who just like spawn out of thin air. I think it's more important to highlight how someone comes to be the person that they are. And it's like a similar thing here, right? We can't now just ignore all of these mistakes that Liam made because he's passed away. I think we just need to be more comfortable with like simultaneously holding someone accountable and also maybe empathizing with their situation and not making it an excuse, but just using it as context or to build understanding or to build an awareness. I think we need to get more comfortable with doing that. Now, another topic that I really want to bring up in relation to Liam's passing is this concept of parasocial grief, because I've seen a lot of articles coming out, or even just people making TikToks, some people making TikToks of them, you know, crying because they heard the news. A lot of people, I think, have felt some type of way or have felt like genuine grief feelings or upset or confusion around Liam's death. And I just want to say that there are actually a number of studies that found that parasocial grief, right? Parasocial meaning a one-way relationship to someone like you would have with a celebrity. They don't know about you, but you know everything about them. And parasocial grief is, number one, like real. There's like psychology studies saying this is like a type of grief. And one study even found that closeness, how close you feel to a person, is a more of a determining factor for how much grief you might feel if that person passes away, rather than whether that person is a social or parasocial relationship to you. So, you know, someone that you have a social relationship with, someone in your real life, if you feel less close to them than you do to someone who's a parasocial relationship to you, your grief can be skewed by closeness and not necessarily by whether you actually knew them or not. So I think it is very valid that people are feeling sad or upset or even crying or feeling like they couldn't focus at work once the news dropped. And you know, some of these studies even extended to like parasocial grief towards fictional characters. So I think like if your brain processes these relationships in a similar way and your emotions coming out of them then are processed in a similar way, I think it makes sense why this news has been so hard-hitting and why a lot of people have taken to the internet to share their feelings and stuff. Now, I have seen people being accused of being dramatic or being ridiculous for this, but I'm here to dispel that. I'm here to say that I don't think that's ridiculous at all. We've got literal research, peer-reviewed, it's on Google Scholar, like look it up. We've got publications telling us that parasocial grief is a real emotion and something that people experience. And you know, Liam's death is more than just death of a celebrity as well, because of his contribution to the One Direction band. For a lot of people, this is a death of adolescence, of teenhood, of all those memories that you associate to this band, who a lot of people like grew up with. A lot of us were in high school, we listened to them in our adolescent years, and to pretend like a member from that band passing away, not having any impact on you, is just, it just doesn't really make any sense to me. I actually remember the first time that I personally witnessed parasocial grief. It was in 2009, and it was when Michael Jackson passed away. And my school, we had this assembly. We played some Michael Jackson songs as like a tribute. And when I turned back to look at some of the teachers, I noticed one of my teachers, he was crying. And I remember at the time, I was like 11 years old, I think. I was a bit confused. I was like, did he know Michael Jackson, like personally? But in hindsight, I'm kind of realizing, you know, in 2009, that teacher was probably like in his 30s, maybe I'd gauge, which means he would have been born like, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s. And so he would have like grown up listening to Michael Jackson. It's like Michael Jackson's death isn't just the death of a single person, which is already quite sad and tragic in itself, but it's also like a loss of those memories of that childhood, of that feeling of growing up being parallel to this person, to the music. Maybe it reminded him of, you know, listening to the songs in the car with his parents, or like all of these memories that we attach to that. And I think that's why a lot of people who grew up with One Direction and who have that nostalgia or memories tied very closely to the band and its members, and, you know, had a point in their time where One Direction boy band members would have been like the most important thing happening. I think it's very reasonable for these people to be experiencing sadness and grief. And so to like pretend that it's dramatic or unreasonable for people to feel some type of way, it's like, that's almost super narrow-minded. Now, I didn't even really like One Direction growing up, I'll be completely honest. And I definitely wasn't a fan of Liam. Like, I'm not going to pretend, I don't want to do that Absolution and death thing where now I pretend like he was someone that I really loved. I didn't really like him as a person. I really didn't like what he had to say on Impulsive, the podcast with Logan Paul, I believe. I thought the dance he did and Strip That Down was silly. Like, I wasn't a fan of him. And yet, even I still felt really sad when I found out he had passed away. And this kind of brings me to my next point, which is like, are you allowed to grieve a celebrity that you didn't like? Because I've just been feeling so confused about all my feelings around this. I feel guilty for not liking him, even though that doesn't make sense. You don't have to like every single person in the entire world. You know, I feel guilty even now for like laughing at his Strip Me Down dance. But then I also feel guilty for feeling sad when he died, because I'm like, but I didn't like him, so why do I feel that way? And it's all just very confusing, and I think it's something that isn't really talked about. But again, I think this is one of those things where not liking someone doesn't automatically equate to wishing they were dead, right? Like that's a pretty dramatic jump to make. So yeah, if you're feeling a bit like me, like just know you're not the only one, and that even though it suddenly seems like every single person was a Liam fan now, and you're not really allowed to like talk about your feelings if you weren't a Liam fan, I sympathize if you've been feeling confused, like, or guilty or ashamed, or all of those horrible feelings that I've kind of been grappling the last 2 weeks. I think we need to be better and more comfortable at operating in these gray areas, these murky areas, which is really tricky because the internet is so binary. Like only one truth can be upheld at a single time, it sometimes feels like. And so you're not allowed to feel sad that Liam died if you disliked him. And you're not allowed to hold him accountable for his wrongdoings without thinking that he should have died. And 3 weeks ago, if we cast our minds back to before this death happened, you weren't even really allowed to say that you liked him. Like, I did not see a single person coming forward as a Liam fan or talking about how much Liam meant to them. And since he's passed away, it's like we've almost seen that completely tilt on its head, where now you're not allowed to say anything bad about him, and suddenly we're seeing all of these odes to Liam or think pieces coming out from people reminiscing on how much Liam meant to them, and One Direction as well, and how they were like a real integral part of their upbringing. This is like one of those reasons why it sucks that the internet is so binary and is so bad at existing in grey areas, because it means that none of these think pieces could have been published while Liam was still alive to read them or hear them or realize the impact that he had on people, because we can only ever do one thing. We can only ever like or dislike someone, can't do both. And I think it just sucks. And I'd love to know if you have a different opinion on all of this. In my opinion, the internet can't cope with grey areas, and there's always just one voice and one opinion that's circulating, and you're either on the right side of history or the wrong side. And 3 weeks ago it was the right side of history to laugh at Liam's dance, or I think it was like self-centered of him to go to Niall's concert and use it as an opportunity to meet fans and be filmed and like distract people from Niall's performance, right? 3-4 weeks ago, be honest, that is what everyone was thinking about him. Everyone was laughing, okay? And now it's like the complete opposite is true. And now suddenly you're a monster if you didn't like Liam, and you're a monster if you ever said anything bad about him. I don't know. I just hate that. I really struggle to wrap my mind around it. This is probably like super incoherent, and I do apologize for that. But yeah, like I said, more of a like off the cuff episode, and I'm talking about something that literally happened 2 weeks ago. So like I don't have all the answers. And I haven't sat on this and thought about the best way to talk about it. But I think it's an important reminder that we need to be pushing for nuance on the internet, and we need to get to a stage where you can feel more than one feeling at one time, or have more than one opinion at one time, without immediately getting cancelled or bullied off the internet for it. And it's a good reminder. Hopefully, like a slight silver lining out of all of this is that, maybe it triggers people to reflect and think about everything in the lead up to these events. So I guess my final thoughts are just thank you for giving me the space to ramble about this and let out all my thoughts, and I hope everyone's okay. And if you're also someone who feels awkward around death, or feels like you don't know how to talk about it or how to process what you're feeling, I hope this gave you some solidarity. And I would love to hear, your opinions on this and parasocial grief and your experiences with it, or just your overall thoughts and feelings. And, next week I am going to put out a more lighthearted episode, because I feel like we've covered some deep topics lately. This one included. And yeah, next week's gonna be fun and lighthearted, okay? But look after yourselves, and yeah, don't forget to rate and review the podcast if you enjoy the show, and please feel free to leave a comment or written review. I love my words of affirmation, and you can connect with me on socials at Mood for Feud. I hope everyone is crushing their goals this week. I hope you are, of course, keeping out of trouble. Don't get into any feuds. and I will talk to you all, to all you lovely listeners. I love you so much. I will talk to you all next week. Bye!